Okay, back. So my computer just hard crashed in the middle of me talking a few minutes ago. So we're just gonna keep going with the. Well, we can start again because it was really early on in the cast. Okay, so we're building off of the idea of tracing today, and what we're going to look at is we're going to look at a technique that lets you animate dots and dashes across a path. So unlike the last couple of days where we assumed that what you're trying to do is trace over top of a graphic that you might have, today we're looking at if you have the shape itself, like a path or something like that, then you can actually do this technique on the path itself. All right, so let's have a look. We're going to switch over. And here we go. So here we have our animation. And we're just the same as yesterday, going from one side of the animation to the other. Or one side of the graphic to the other. Okay, with a dot. And here it's using an easing curve, but that doesn't really matter. What's important today is this is the target that we're trying to achieve in the first step. And we're going to learn how to use dashes and lines to do that. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, what we should have is we should actually be able to manipulate or get access to a path, a shape, inside a flow. So yesterday when we were looking at, for instance, this graphic, this one right here, it was actually a graphic. Notice up here in the top left-hand corner, when I selected, there's this icon right here for this graphic. This is a graphic that we were tracing and we were doing the inflection points along the way. Okay. So we were looking at the inflection points and we were sort of moving the dot to where those inflection points are, and then we were adjusting the animation along the way. Now this actually has its benefits, but sometimes you don't need that, maybe because that's not the aesthetic you're going for. All right. So today's technique uses a shape, and here we have a line. All right. And what we're going to do, we're going to want to keep this line around maybe for later. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to duplicate it in place, and this will be my dashes. And now this one, I'm just going to right click and I'm going to lock it so we can't touch it. And now this one is going to go over top of the whole animation. And I'm just going to move the animation back to the beginning. And another thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to change the easing curve of this animation to be linear, just because that's the style that I want to work with today. Now, the first step is to style or get the line close to the same style as the dot that we're going to trace. And the way that we do that is we go over, we look at the dot. The dot is 32 high in its size. And we can go back down here and we select the dashes, and we're going to change that stroke width. We're going to turn on relative mode. We're going to change that stroke width to 32 and hit enter. So now it's the same height as that. And we're going to want to create sort of rounded edges to that so we can simulate a dot. And that starts to give us the simulation of like the sort of same size and outer shape of this thing. Now, one thing that is different is that the line starts right here, okay? That curvature or that rounded end cap comes out a little bit further. So what we're going to do is we're going to take that line, we're going to select it, we're going to move it all the way back so that it's basically in the same position as the circle. Or the dot. Looks like I changed the Y by accident. Let's get rid of that. I went back up here. I made it 200 to keep it back in place. And now we're going to go to the end of our animation, all the way to the end like this, just dragging the playhead. And you notice how the line isn't long enough to cover this? Well, that's pretty easy to fix. We're going to double click into it. We're going to grab that point and we're just going to extend that line until it fits. And then we're going to double click back out. Okay, so now our line covers both sides of the animation. And what do I mean by both sides of the animation? Well, we're going to style the line in a way where it is going to be able to look like that dot. And you actually need the path to be in a position where at the end of the animation, the dot is covering the final spot of the original dot. And likewise at the beginning. So that's why we have to make this path a little bit longer. Now, what are we going to do about that? Let's add a dash pattern to the path and start to create that that dot. Okay, and we'll just see everything. Maybe I'm saying the word dot too many times in a row, but we'll see how that goes in the next couple seconds. All right, so we're back in Flow. And we have this, and what we're going to do is we're going to scroll down to here, and right at the bottom there is the dash pattern. And I'm just going to make a basic pattern of 10 by 100. What this is going to do is it's going to make a dash on my shape that is 10 wide, and then there's a 100-point gap between it, and then another 10 and a 100-point gap, and another 10 and a 100-point gap, and another 10 and a 100-point gap. Okay, and what we'll do for now so that we can see everything sort of side by side is we're going to change the color of the stroke for this one as well. Let's make it a nice purple. Okay, and now you can see those dashes: dash, gap, dash, gap, dash, gap. Now, what is a circle when it comes to dashes? Well, it is the smallest possible dash that you can create that has rounded corner or rounded line caps on it. So you notice here how each one of these dashes is rounded at the end. That's because the line cap is rounded. All right, so let's make that dash pattern 0.01. That's the smallest, and now we have a dot. All right, we have a dot. We have a dot, and then we have a big gap. Okay, so now what do we want to do? We want to get rid of the rest of the pattern. Okay, we want to get rid of this dot and this dot and this dot and this dot and this dot. And the way that we do that is by making the gap really large. So a dash pattern is exactly this. It's a pattern. It's a repeating pattern. All right, so if we make the gap long enough that it appears that the dash isn't repeating, then it will look like there's just one dot. Okay, so this is how we do it. We take this right here and we just press Shift, put our cursor inside, we select the gap, press up, 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 and we can just hold it, and you see how that's getting bigger and bigger. All right, we're just going to keep going until it fits. Now, so let's say it's like, let's just take a guess here and say 500. We'll speed it up a little bit. Let's go 575, 75, because we don't exactly know. And then we can just do something like this. There you go. And so once it gets to the end of that dot like that, the next step, it's just going to disappear. And why does it disappear? Because the path itself appears to be 642 points long. And so what we're doing is we're saying from the beginning, 642, we're going to add 1. That little dot, that little 0.01 of a dash, it's actually happening now outside the end of the visible path. Okay? That's why it disappears. It's still there. We just don't see it because it's outside of that visible space. And now we can animate the dash pattern. And the way that we animate the dash pattern is by turning relative mode off, and we already know that it's 643. What we're going to do is we're going to just fiddle with this, and then it looks to me like if I make the offset positive, it's moving that shape backwards. So what we're going to want to do is we're just going to press down and shift, and we're going to move it just like that. Okay, and it's going to go actually to the same number, 642. And we can go down, down, down. Oh, up, 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 up. There we go, 644. And so, and we're going to make it minus 642. That's right. That's the direction that we want to go in. Okay, and there we go. So now we have our dot moving, and our dash is actually using this easing curve like that. And now we have this linear one. And if I hit play, they're going to move at the same time. See that? This is how you can use a dot, or you can use a dash pattern with a big gap to simulate something moving across a path. Now, why is this path back here? Well, that's because it's the one that we locked out. That's the line. All right. So I'm going to duplicate this. I'm going to hit pause. I'm going to duplicate this. And I'm going to call this dashes lots. And instead of actually having this dot travel 100 points across, what we're going to do is we're going to make it look like there's lots of dots moving across the drawing. So I'm going to select this path again. I'm going to turn on relative mode. We're going to change the dash pattern to be 100. So there's a 1, a 0.01, and then a 100. Okay, so now if I hit play, okay, it's going to do the same thing. And we actually, since it's a repeating animation, we actually don't need it to go all the way to, at the end here, we don't need it to go all the way to minus 642. We should be able to say minus 100, like that, or something very similar. So let's just go to 0. Okay, and what we're going to do is we're going to move it so that there is a dot that is 100 wide, 100. Oh, minus 100. And what we should be able to see is, let's make that linear again. There you go. So we actually have a repeating dot animation. Let's turn off this one just because it's a little bit distracting at the moment. So we have this repeating pattern of the dots moving, and it looks like they're just continuing to come out. Okay, they're just continuing to come out, but what's really happening is we're just moving from one place to another and then repeating that animation, and it just looks like it's overlapping because the measurement of 0 to 100 or 0 to minus 100 is the same as the gap that we are that we've created for our animation. All right, so this actually means something really cool. It means that if you actually have access to something crazier, okay, like I'm going to hit plus and I'm going to bring this in, and let's say you have something like this, and let's duplicate that path, duplicate that in place, and these two, we are just going to lock those in place. Okay, and what we're going to do now is we're going to take this path and we're going to do the same trick as before. We're going to make it 32. We're going to make it purple. We're going to make it 1 by 100, enter, and actually it's 0.01 by 100, and we're going to make the pattern rounded like that, and we're going to offset this by minus 100. Okay, so now let's go down. I was creating those animations, and let's I forgot to turn on relative mode, so what are we going to do? We're going to delete the stroke color, the stroke width, and the line cap change, and we're not going to change the dash. Yeah, we're going to do all of that. We're going to delete everything except for the dash offset, and here we're just going to right click on that track and we're going to reverse it. So now if we play that back, okay, it looks like all those are moving along our path. And if I change this to linear, it looks like they're continuously moving along that path. I'm just going to hit this. Okay, so now it looks like we have this chain of things that's just moving along this crazy, crazy path. All right, really simple. Simple concept. Sometimes the effect that you're looking for is actually quite easy to produce, even though it has these like wild sort of visual effects. And this is exactly one of those cases. And it also means that if we actually had the graphic from yesterday, okay, we had the graphic from yesterday, we apply the exact same techniques that we just learned, then you're actually going to get something that looks like this. Just like that. Okay. So what have we learned? You can actually create a dash pattern that looks like a dot by making the gap really small, the line cap rounded on both ends, the dot really small with a really wide gap. And if you have the gap long enough, longer than your actual path length, which is kind of variable, it depends on the shape of the path, then it looks like one dot moving across. If you have it the same, if you have multiple dots in there by reducing the pattern, then it looks like there's lots of things happening at the same time. But really, it's just one thing. It's the dash pattern sliding across the path. Okay, and so again, you can start to get these really awesome techniques. Now, I do believe that is a good enough amount of stuff for today. And then tomorrow we'll just do a recap of the whole week. Okay, we'll do a little recap of the whole week, and I will show you why you might actually want to be tracing things by hand in the way that we did on Monday and Tuesday, and on Monday and Tuesday, because there's some extra techniques that you can do. So if you're doing something simple like the dot, this is a really great technique, and it makes it really easy to make complex tracing animations. But there might be some aesthetics that you want to try and get on top of just having a layer move along a path that are really great with doing it the other way. Okay, I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.